All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is lecture number 30, which will be on conservation of momentum. So before that, we'll do a quick recap and a couple of problems. So last lecture, lecture number 29, was on the conservation of mass. So we derived the general transport theorem, also known as the Reynolds transport theorem. Post that, we use that theorem, transport theorem, to derive the conservation of mass equation for continuum bodies. So we'll do a quick recap today of the transport theorem as well as the conservation of momentum equation, conservation of mass. Post a quick recap, we will solve one or two problems. So let's just take one problem on the above. Then we will start with the deriving the conservation of momentum equations, which includes both the conservation of linear momentum as well as the conservation of angular momentum. All right, so let's go back to the last lecture and do a quick recap of the same. So in the previous lecture, we talked about the transport theorem. So we started with an extensive property called Pij dot dot dot. That's an nth order tensor, could be a scalar, vector, or any order tensor. So we said that let the corresponding intensive property be P star, which is defined as P, the quantity P per unit volume, not per unit mass, but in this case per unit volume. So based on that, we we started with taking a material derivative of P, which was basically the idea was to find the rate of change of time rate of change of P in the whole volume or in the volume that we are considering. So based on that, we derived the transport theorem finally, and then we applied that to conservation of for the derivation of the conservation of mass equation. So in this case, for the conservation of mass, our intensive property was density and the extensive property was mass. So when we applied that, we finally obtained the continuity equation or the conservation of mass equation in the Eulerian form, which is shown on the top in the boxed equation. And of course, we can apply the material derivative definition for Eulerian systems, for Eulerian Eulerian description. And based on that, we can have different forms of the conservation of mass equation. And if the fluids or the if the continuum body that we're considering is incompressible, in that case the density does not change with time, density of a collection of material particles. So in that case, d by dt of rho is 0. So that gives us the a simplified form of the continuity equation or the conservation of mass equation, which is simply the divergence of velocity field is identically 0. Okay. Then post that, we derive the material form of the continuity equation. So that gave us this final equation, which simply tells us that d by dt of rho tilde times j is equal to 0. So rho tilde is the density in the current configuration written in terms of capital X and T. So remember, Lagrangian form of the material form is always described in terms of the material or the Lagrangian coordinates, which is basically the coordinate of a particle at t equals 0, the reference configuration. Okay, so this is where we stopped. So today we will start with doing a problem on applying the conservation of mass equation. And in fact, the problem in this case So the problem is we have to show, or we have to derive the Eulerian form of the continuity equation. Sorry, let's use conservation of mass because that's more easier to remember. So derive the Eulerian form of the conservation of mass equation starting with the Lagrangian form of the equation. Okay. So what we stated earlier was that the Lagrangian and the Eulerian form are two different forms of the same equation. So what we want to stress here is, and what we want to understand is that they both can be derived one from the other. Just a second. Sorry. So we have to start with the Lagrangian form and show that we can derive the Eulerian form from the same. So the Lagrangian form was rho tilde j, and the material derivative of that is 0. So that's the starting equation, and we have to derive the Eulerian form from the same. It's very straightforward. We simply use the product rule here. So what we can do is we can write this as rho tilde j dot rho tilde dot times j. So dot on the top simply means the material derivative of that quantity, and this is 0. So we simply have applied the product rule on the left hand side. Now, if you remember, then j dot was the divergence of velocity times j. Okay, so we had derived this 2 lectures ago. So we can use this property. So this becomes rho tilde Okay, now, remember that rho tilde still is the density written in terms of the material coordinates, capital X and T. So we can always, so rho tilde is in terms of capital X and T, and we can substitute capital X as a function of small x and T. So we can always write this as capital X is a function of small x and T by the inverse mapping and T. So this we call as rho as a function of small x and T. So tilde, as if you remember, was used for the Lagrangian form, and we can come back to the Eulerian form, so which we'll call simply rho. All right, so we will apply that here. So what we get is, I'll just move around the terms in the addition. So this becomes rho dot. So remember the tilde is gone because now we're describing things in terms of small x and T. And then we have Vi comma I times rho. And that is equal to 0. And the reason being that the Jacobian is not equal to 0, because if Jacobian was 0, then it's if the Jacobian matrix, the determinant becomes 0, then the inverse mapping is not possible. Okay. So we know that J is not equal to 0, so we can apply this. So what we finally get is this. This is the Eulerian form of the equation. If you remember, rho dot plus the divergence of velocity times rho is equal to 0. We had also derived the other form, which was writing rho dot in terms of the material derivative. So we have a local rate of change of rho, plus we had the convective part. Okay, let's use I. That's much more easier to use, understand. So we have rho I So vi rho comma I plus we have vi comma I rho. So then what we did was we combined the second and the third term. So we get vi rho, and this whole is comma I, that's equal to 0. Okay, so this is the Eulerian form of the. So this is the Eulerian form of the conservation of mass equation. All right. So next, now since so this is an application. Well, in fact, this is stressing on the fact that the Lagrangian and the Eulerian form are the same. It's so that the only difference between the two is the coordinates or the coordinate system we use to describe the different functions. So you can always choose whichever is more suitable, and you can in fact transform from one to the other whenever you want, depending on the situation. All right. So next, before we start working on the conservation of linear momentum or the linear momentum principle, as we said, we will derive one identity. So in many cases, we tend to write the intensive property as some property per unit mass. There are many cases where we do that. So we will just see when we have properties written per unit mass, how does the material derivative transform for those cases. So if you remember, we had written our P ij dot, which was the extensive property, as an integral over the complete volume of P star, which was the corresponding intensive property. So it's a function of x and t times d omega. Okay, so this is P star, as you can see, is the property P per unit volume. Sometimes we have properties per unit mass. So what we'll do is we will write P, which of course is a function of x and t, is a product of the density times a property A star, which is also a function of x and t. So now you can see that since P star was some property per unit volume, when you multiply density to that, that becomes property per unit. Sorry, A star in this case is the property per unit mass. So if you divide P star by density, you get the property per unit mass. So A is the corresponding intensive property. Okay, so this is so A. Sometimes we tend to work with A star rather than P star. So in this case, going back to our transport theorem, well, going back to our P term P we had. So, so Vikram, can you please put your but he's left. Sorry. So we have Pij dot, which is written as the d by dt of the integral as we have defined it. So instead of writing P star d omega, now we write rho times A star d omega. Okay, so I've simplified the scenario, so it's only a second order tensor, just as for the ease of writing. You can always put dot 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 in front of that, and then I've removed the functional dependence of rho and A on x and t, just for simplification. Just to stress on the mathematics here without the functional dependence. All right, so we use the same strategy as we had done earlier to write the integral, to move the d by dt of the material derivative inside the integral. We will transform the integral to the reference or the Lagrangian coordinates. So what we do is, this becomes rho tilde. So now rho tilde is a function of capital X and t. So what we did was we simply applied the transformation from small x to capital X. So rho becomes a rho tilde. It's a different function. Similarly, our a star becomes a star tilde, which is now a function of capital X and t. And you know that d omega can be written as j times d omega naught. Okay. And this integral now is on omega naught instead of omega. So what we have done is we have transformed everything to our Lagrangian or the material coordinates, capital X's. So everything is written in terms of the initial configuration, omega naught. Because now we can move the d by dt inside the integral, because omega naught does not change with time. So there is no rate of change of the volume in this case. All right. So this becomes, now we can apply the product rule. So this becomes integral over omega naught, and then we can combine our a star can be one of the terms. So this becomes a star dot times, sorry, there's a tilde here, rho tilde j, and then the second term becomes a tilde ij, and then rho tilde j with a dot on top. So the dot is on the complete rho tilde j term. Let's write it more clearly. The dots on the center, so it's on the whole term rho tilde times j. It's simply application of product rule, and then you have d omega naught. All right. So now this term, which is rho tilde j with a dot on top, we know that this is 0 because we had derived the material form of the continuity equation, which tells us that rho tilde times j is 0. Sorry, the material derivative of rho tilde times j is 0. So this term is 0 from the material sorry, there's some problem with my iPad. Let's try to sort that out. All right, so we're back. So the second term, which is rho tilde times j with a dot on top, and that's 0 because using the material form of the conservation of mass equation. All right, so we only have the first term remaining now. So this becomes integral over omega naught, a dot over a tilde star ij, and then we have rho tilde times j d omega naught. Okay, so very similar approach. Now what we see is that j times d omega naught can again be written as omega. So we can transform things back to the current configuration. Remember that this is pij dot. Write that here. Transforming back to the current configuration. So now you have integral, written over omega, and a tilde becomes a now because you've gone back to small x coordinate rather than capital X. So this is a function of small x in t. Then rho tilde becomes a rho because again that's transforming back to the Eulerian coordinates. So it's again a function of small x in t. And then j times d omega naught becomes d omega. So what did we get here? So going back to the term that we started with in the previous slide, we started with a d by dt of an integral of rho times a star. So what happened was when the d by dt moved inside the integral, it interestingly only applied on the a star term, leaving the rho away. So what we get is, so d by dt simply goes on to the a term or the a star term here. So that's an important property. So whenever you have p dot as a function of time, it simply applies to the a star term, where a star is the property per unit mass. Okay, we will use that in the next few steps. Okay, so that was whenever we have some property per unit mass rather than property per unit volume. All right, so let's move on to the linear momentum principle. All right, so I mean, you already know about this principle. It says that the net force acting on a body, the net external force acting on a body, is equal to the rate of change of its linear momentum. So that can be written as dp by dt, where p is the vector, the linear momentum, is equal to the net external force acting on the body. We already know about this from our high school. That's the Newton's second law of motion written in a different form. So one form is force equals mass times acceleration. The more general form is the rate of change of linear momentum is equal to external force acting on a body. So that allows the change of mass as well as the change of velocity, which is called the acceleration. So in the case of, for example, rockets, you also need to consider the rate of change of mass because the mass is being ejected out. All right, so let's apply this to a body. So let's draw our body on the right hand side. So what you have is you have different forces acting on the body. In this case, as we had done earlier, we write the external force as a sum of two different categories of forces. So one is called the body force, which acts on volume. So in this case, let's take small volume, and the body force acting on it is, so let's call this as d omega, and the body force that acts on it we'll call that as rho bi. Okay, so it's the same convention that we had used earlier. So we call this rho bi. So remember that bi was defined as the body force per unit mass. Okay, so rho times bi becomes the body force per unit volume. Right, and then you have surface forces, so which act on surfaces. So we take a small surface on the surface of this enclosed volume, and that surface has a unit normal which is given as n hat. Surface has a magnitude d gamma, the capital gamma here, and then the surface force acting on this infinitesimal surface area is written as the not the traction. The traction on this small area is written as T n hat with an I as a subscript because it's a force. We just pause. We had a question from someone. Let me check. So the question is rho times J.
Sir, on the previous page.
Sorry, on which page?
The previous one.
Yes, fourth page.
Yeah, at the top, when deriving rho tilde and j, there should be another term, right? Rho and j dot.
Okay, so let's go back to our third slide. So we started with this term at the bottom. So we had d by dt of rho tilde a tilde j. And then what we did was we combined rho tilde and j as one single term and
Yeah.
a star as a separate term.
Hmm.
So the second term that you see is a d by dt of rho tilde times j. So rho tilde and j is acting together as one single term.
Ah, okay, okay. So it's on the top. I was assuming it's on the only on rho dot. Okay,
No,
I get.
it's on the whole rho tilde and j. So that's the reason I tried to put the dot in the middle. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
okay.
this is confusing, but it is the time derivative of rho tilde times j, and that is equal to 0 from the material form of the
Yeah,
conservation of mass equation. Right? Fine. So coming back. All right, so the body has two types of forces. So we'll write these forces in the second step. Sorry. So the external forces acting on the body now can be written as the first we'll write the body force. So that is integral over the complete volume, and the infinitesimal body force is rho times bi times d omega. So rho times bi gives us the body force per unit volume, and multiplying that by d omega, the small infinitesimal volume, gives us the infinitesimal body force, which we can integrate over the complete volume omega. So that gives us the total external body force acting on the volume. Similarly, for the surface force, that will be integrated over the complete enclosing surface of the body. So that gives us integral over gamma, and the traction is, if you remember, is the surface force per unit area, so which we multiply to the area that gives us the force. So that force, the infinitesimal force on a small area d gamma, is given as traction times d gamma, which when integrated over the complete surface, enclosing surface, gives us the total surface force acting on the body. Now remember that we are saying it's a complete body, but we could have taken some particular subsection of the body as well. So that will give us the rate of change of the angular momentum of that subsection. So it's dependent on what is the body under consideration for which we draw the free body diagram. Okay, so in this case, the complete enclosing surface may or may not be the complete volume, depending on what volume we have considered as omega. And the left hand side, which is the material derivative of the momentum. Now, momentum here is the extensive property. So momentum can be written as, this is the total momentum acting on the complete volume that we have written as omega. Let's call this omega. And the total surface area is gamma, just for clarity. So this momentum is an integral over the complete volume. And momentum, as you know, can be written as your density times d omega, that's a small mass dm, times velocity vi. So we have written the linear momentum principle in the initial form by writing the external forces acting on the body as a sum of body forces and surface forces. Now the next few steps are very similar to what we have done in the past. So the first thing we do is we write the traction using our Cauchy stress principle. So you remember that the traction can be written as sigma ij nj, that is using the Cauchy stress principle. And so let's write that in the bracket. Okay, next we can apply the Gauss divergence theorem to convert a surface integral to volume integral. So this becomes a volume integral, and we get sigma ij comma j here, and then we have a d omega. All right, rest of the terms are as they are. So finally, what we have is now also on the first term, or the only term on the left hand side. Now our vi is similar to a star. So just a couple of, well, in the last slide we derived this expression that when you have d by dt, let's start from this one. So whenever you have this d by dt of rho times a star times d omega in the integral, then we simply get d by dt of a star as shown here. So we'll do the same thing. So this simply becomes integral. So rho stays as it is. We get d by dt of vi times d omega. So that is the reason we derived that expression to be able to apply that in this linear momentum principle. So now the good thing is that all the integrals are over the volume, so we can combine the terms. So 1 second, the laptop's almost out of battery. Perfect. So now I can combine all the terms into on one side. So what we get is integral over omega. Then we have rho. So I'll put a dot on the top of vi. So that's the equation we have. Now again, by the same ideas that we have used in the past, now this integral is over a volume which is arbitrary. Yeah, I told you in the beginning that omega may not be the complete body. It may be a subset of the body. So that means that we can choose any sub-volume in the complete body as omega. So since the integral is the integral of the integrand is 0 for any arbitrary volume, so what that means is the only way this can be possible if omega is arbitrary is that the integrand vanishes locally. So what that means is, since omega, so the choice of omega is arbitrary, that means the integrand must vanish. What that means is rho bi dot is equal to rho bi plus sigma ij comma j. So this is your linear momentum equation for continuum bodies. So basically, earlier we derived a similar form except for the equilibrium case. So we derived this equation for a situation where the net force acting on the body is zero, because if the body is under equilibrium, that means that the net force acting on any sub volume of the body also has to be zero. Otherwise, that sub volume will start accelerating. So that was a special case where we talked about equilibrium situations. Now in this case, the body may be accelerating. As we can see from the left hand side, we have a vi dot term. So this helps us calculate the local velocity field. So if we know the net force acting on the body, which is the right hand side, we can find the velocity field by integrating this equation for velocity. Okay, so this is called the local linear momentum equation, or local conservation of linear momentum. Let's write it more clearly. Any question on that? All right. Now the next equation that we'll talk about is the conservation of angular momentum, or the angular momentum principle. I mean, applying the angular momentum principle. All right. Again, we know this angular momentum principle. So what that says is the rate of change, or a time rate of change of angular momentum is equal to the net torque acting on the body. So again, it's very similar ideas. So here, to find the net torque acting on the body, the left hand side, the left hand side, which is the material derivative of the angular momentum. Angular momentum, as you know, can be written as the moment of the linear momentum. So this left hand side becomes d by dt of, integrate over the complete volume. So what we'll do is, let's draw it here. So let's say you have the origin, you choose some origin from which you define all the coordinates, and then you have body force, or sorry, in this case we're talking about momentum. So for some point, the momentum, the velocity field is given as, let's say, vi. So the angular momentum, because of this velocity at that point, is simply the cross product of the position vector x times, so x cross p is what the angular momentum is. So this becomes, we can write the cross product in terms of epsilon. So this becomes xj, and then rho v k d omega. So this xj is our x vector, and rho times d omega is the small mass dm times vk, where vk means the velocity, and we have epsilon ijk here. So this is simply applying x cross p, where p is the angular momentum, linear momentum of that point. Okay, so this is the left hand side. And the right hand side, which is the net torque acting on the body, is a sum, sorry, net external torque. So that is the sum of the torques, the total torques applied by the body forces and surface forces. So we'll first write the body force that, so we'll integrate over the complete volume. And in this case again, we're talking about the torque, which is the moment of the force. So we can write x cross F. So this becomes epsilon ijk, and then we have xj, which is the position vector. So we're talking about some, let's say, body force here. So we get xj, and then our body force is rho bi d omega. So this becomes your force. This is your position vector. So it's cross product of the two. And we integrate that over the complete volume to find the net torque because of body force. And then the second term will appear because of the surface forces, which we integrate over the complete surface, enclosing surface of the volume omega. This again becomes epsilon ijk xj, and then this, as you know, is the traction times d gamma. So this is our angular momentum equation. Now we have to simplify this equation. So let's do that. So let's work on the left hand side first. So on the left hand side, what we want to do is we want to move the d by dt term inside. Now there's no point of having a d by dt of epsilon because epsilon does not depend on time. But x, which is the Eulerian coordinate, that does depend on time. So again, we can apply the same relation where we had the A star, which was the some property per unit mass. So what we can do is we can, well, epsilon does not depend on time, and then we have rho here, and then we get a d by dt of xj vk d omega. Same idea that we had, as we had used earlier. So on the right hand side, now we'll keep the first term as it is. We'll not touch it, and we'll use the Gauss divergence formula on the second term. So the first term stays as it is. In the second term, we'll apply first the Cauchy stress principle. This becomes sigma KL NL. Right, so that's applying our Cauchy stress formula. So our T becomes sigma dot n. So we have made sure that we have not repeated any index out of I, j, and k. Well, k stays as it is because k is, sigma has to have a k, but the repeated index in this expression for Cauchy stress formula has an L now, which is a new index we have to introduce. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll apply the Gauss divergence theorem to convert the surface integral to volume integral so that we can take all the terms into one integrand. So let's copy this, and then we need the same equation on the next slide. Right. So now we want to apply the Gauss divergence theorem onto this term. So I'll simply write this term using Gauss divergence theorem. Then I'll delete this. Uh, so when you apply the Gauss divergence theorem, this becomes all right. Now, of course, there's no point of having a bracket with epsilon in it because epsilon does not depend on L. It's just a constant. So we have this. So that's by applying the Gauss divergence theorem. So let's see if we can simplify this expression. So this is epsilon ijk, and then we can again apply the product rule here. So this becomes x j comma L times sigma kl plus xj times sigma kl comma L, and then we have a d omega. All right, and the other terms stay as they are. Now let's simplify this term further. So we have xj comma L. Now xj comma L, as we know, is delta jl. Okay, that's by definition. The del xj by del xl is simply delta jl. Then you have sigma kl, and the second term is xj sigma kl comma L. And in fact, I can apply the substitution property here. So I can remove this delta jl, and this simply becomes sigma kj. All right. Now, for the left hand side, the first term, this is integral over omega epsilon ijk. I'm talking about this term. We can apply the product rule again. So this becomes xj dot vk plus xj vk dot times d omega. And then we have the second term, which is the body force term, which we won't touch. So, let's copy this equation on the next page and then simplify this further. So now we have everything on in terms of omega, so we can combine terms. So let's write the complete expanded form now. Now xj dot, that is simply vj. So did I forget the row on the LHS? Thanks. Yes, I did. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully, I have not made a mistake here. So we have this expanded form of the equation. Now what we'll do is we'll try to get rid of as many terms as possible. So the first term we can get rid of is this one, Vj Vk. And the way it works is that when you expand this bracket, then you will get a product of epsilon ijk and then Vj Vk. And if you remember, we said the double dot product of a skew symmetric and a symmetric tensor is 0. So in this case, we have a skew symmetric tensor, which is epsilon ijk. It's skew symmetric in J and K, and Vj times Vk is symmetric in J and K. So this product becomes 0. So what we get is simply the second term, which is xj times Vk dot times d omega, and then let's bring the terms on the left hand side. So we don't need to write d omega here, and epsilon can also be taken as common. Then we have xj times rho bi, and then we have sigma kj and xj times sigma kl comma l d omega. So what we've done is we've taken, and this is equal to 0. So we have moved all the terms to the left hand side into one integral. We can also take we can take is that right? There is some concern here. Well, so the question is, shouldn't it be BA in the chess? Did I make a mistake again? You are right. This has to be BK. So I made a mistake while copying from the previous page. Let's confirm. Well, probably I started with the wrong term. So this has to be DK. Yeah, thanks for that. This is a cross product of X and rho B K. Yeah. So let's K as well. All right, so these are the terms we have. So now we can do a further simplification or further, yes. So what we can do is we can take X common. So we take xj common. So we get rho vk dot minus rho bk minus sigma kl comma l. And then the second term we have is sigma kj is equal to 0. Okay, now we have simplified things a lot. And this equation that you see, rho bk dot minus rho bk minus sigma kl comma l, is nothing but the equation we derived earlier. This is equal to 0 from the linear momentum principle. Okay, so this whole term goes to 0 because from the linear momentum principle. So we're getting something very similar to what we had got earlier in the equilibrium equations while applying the angular momentum principle. So what we finally get is integral over omega epsilon ijk sigma kj d omega equals 0. Okay, and this simply tells us this is exactly what we got earlier while applying the angular momentum conservation for equilibrium equations for systems under equilibrium. So this implies that sigma jk is symmetric. Okay. So the only idea we learned here is that sigma is symmetric even for the bodies which are accelerating, because earlier we had derived sigma to be symmetric from the conservation of angular momentum when the net torque was zero. But even if the net torque is not zero, that is, the body may be accelerating angularly, even then sigma is symmetric. So this is a more general application of sigma being symmetric. Okay, that's all we learned from the application of angular momentum principle for accelerating bodies. Okay, and remember that while starting the angular momentum principle, we said that the net external torque acting on the body leads to an increase in the angular momentum only. We can always have concentrated moments acting on the system, which also come on the left hand side. But it's only true for polar materials that we have concentrated moments. And we discussed earlier as well that we were not talking about those systems. The systems are very rare, and for all the systems we consider, the concentrated moments are not they don't exist in those systems. So for non-polar materials, this is the case, and sigma is symmetric. But for polar materials, where you can have concentrated moments, then sigma may not be symmetric. Okay, so we will let's see if we can solve a problem. Very straightforward problem. Actually, it's a problem again on the conservation of mass equation, but let's do that. So this is problem number 5.6 from the book. So the velocity field is given to us. So we have the three components of velocity. So this is the velocity field showing dependence on x1, x2, and x3, and A, B, and C are constants here. Okay, so you have to find the condition. So for A, when the continuity equation is satisfied, continuity of the conservation of mass, and we have to find the condition for the second case where the motion is isochoric. All right. So again, very straightforward application of continuity equation in part A. So let's write the continuity equation. So the continuity equation, one of the forms was that d by dt of the density rho plus rho times vi comma I is 0. Okay, so we can find vi comma I in this case. So vi comma I is v1 comma 1 plus v2 comma 2 plus v3 comma 3. So v1 comma 1, as we can say, is simply a. v2 comma 2 is again a, and v3 comma 3 is 0 because v3 only depends on x1 and x2, not x3. So this simply becomes twice of a. So the continuity equation simplifies to d by dt of rho plus twice of a times rho equals 0. Okay, it's a simple first order ODE that you can solve easily. So we can write d rho by rho equals minus 2a dt. We integrate both sides, and what we get is finally rho equals rho naught times e to the minus 2a t. Okay, so that's a condition. So we had to find a condition. So we have found a condition on rho which allows us to satisfy the continuity equation for this velocity field. So the only thing that is given to us is a velocity field in the system, in this case. For the part B, it's an independent part to part A. Motion is isochoric. Now, if you remember, isochoric motion simply means that the divergence of velocity is 0. So Vi comma I is twice of A, so that means that A has to be 0. So if A is 0 in this expression for the velocity field, then the motion is isochoric. That is, the volume of a collection of material particles does not change with time. Right, so we'll stop here, and in the next lecture, so remember that these equations that we have derived for the linear and the angular momentum are the Eulerian forms of the equations. So next lecture will be on derivation of the Lagrangian form of the linear momentum principle, and for that we will derive two new stress tensors, which we'll call the Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensors 1 and 2. So they are different from the Cauchy stress tensor. So what we learn is that Cauchy stress tensor is not the only stress tensor that's available in continuum mechanics. So we'll stop here, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.